Okay, welcome to the inaugural Cloud Salon of 2024. I'm very happy to introduce our guest, Johann Diedrick, who you might see as the only other person with video on presently. Um, so, Johann is an artist and engineer who makes listening rooms, spaces for encountering new sonic possibilities off the grid. He works to surface resonant histories of past interactions, inscribed in material and embedded in space, peeling back vibratory layers to reveal hidden memories and untold stories. He shares his tools and techniques through listening tours, workshops, and open source hardware and software. He's the founder of A Quiet Life, a sonic engineering and research studio that designs and builds audio-related software and hardware projects. He's a 2023 through 25 Just Tech Fellow and a 2023 through 24 Performance AIRspace Resident at Abrons Art Center in New York. His work has been featured in Wire and Musicworks magazines, and presented at venues such as Ars Electronica, Linz, Hirshhorn Museum, Sculpture Garden, um, and DIA. So, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome, Johann. Um,
Thanks,
So
Jesse.
before we get, yeah, my
Oh.
pleasure. For anyone who's not in the know, Cloud Salon is our design and technology program webinar through Zoom that we began early during lockdown. And yeah, so we're just very excited to welcome you on to talk to us here at Parsons. So I think without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Johann. Um, and yeah, just a reminder for anyone who's joined late, we are recording. Please keep that in mind. And when we reach the end of Johann's talk, then we'll get into Q&A. So if you have a question, please just use the chat, and I'll unmute you if you would like to be unmuted to ask your question verbally. Otherwise, it's perfectly fine to ask in the chat. So, all right, I'm gonna mute myself, and Johann, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks so much. Cool. I'm gonna just share my screen and make sure to share sound and make sure it's the right desktop. And I'll hit share. And great. Can you see my screen? Awesome. Hey everyone. My name's Johann. I'm gonna be giving a presentation for Cloud Salon. Really happy to be here. Thank you, Parsons D&T program. Thanks, Jesse, for inviting me. So a little bit about myself. As Jesse said, I'm an artist and an engineer. I make listening rooms, which is these spaces that allow for different kinds of sonic events and material to asynchronously or synchronously encounter each other and see what new sorts of sonic encounter arises from this type of experience and this type of setting. Jesse gave a really wonderful bio introduction for me, so I won't go, regurgitate that. What I will say is that this is going to be somewhat of an unusual talk. This is one of these kind of freewheeling, I wouldn't say spontaneous, but I'm going to be sharing some ideas and some things that are kind of fresh of mind that I haven't really spoken about out loud. It's not an artist talk. I won't be going through like a portfolio of work. Instead, I want to focus on process and not on output so much. And using this opportunity for me to reflect a little bit about where I am in my practice, that might hopefully be beneficial for you all as students, for where you are in your practice as you're perhaps starting out or coming back to school. I think a lot of this talk is about how to find your passion and what it means to explore to find your passion. But then once you've found the things that you love or is bringing you the kind of success or output that you want, how do you harness that that self-knowledge in order to do whatever it is that you want to accomplish in the world? So that's going to be more or less kind of the gist of this talk. But a little bit more about me. I've been playing with technology my whole life. This is a photo of an article from my local newspaper where I grew up in Sunrise, Florida. The caption says that I'm taking the program through its paces. I was in these gifted classes when I was in elementary school. And so when educational software got onto the scene, we were the first ones that got to try it. And it really made a huge impression on me when I was young. And ever since then, I've been playing with technology throughout my whole entire life as a way to express myself creatively. I ended up going to the University of Pennsylvania, where I studied engineering and eventually sociology, where I've met Jesse. Jesse and I have been friends for almost 15 years now. If you can believe it. It's been quite a while. So it really means a lot that I'm here giving this talk and with Jesse. It has a lot of sentimental um, value. I went to the ITP program about 10 years ago. So, maybe you know of it. It's a very similar program to Parsons D&T over at NYU. Some other things, I worked at the Metropolitan Museum of Art for 4.5 years as a software engineer there. And then more recently, I was working at this company called Somewhere Good, which was a voice-based social platform that allowed people to leave asynchronous voice notes to have conversations in community. I was the director of engineering there for a while. All of this, has gotten me to a place now. I'm currently a Just Tech Fellow through the Social Science Research Council, as Jesse mentioned, where I'm focused on examining the origins of racial bias in speech recognition and speech AI. And I'm also a performance art in residence at Abrons Art Center, where I'm working on a new production that is combining Caribbean cosmology, the history of pirate radio, and Jamaican sound system culture to speculate on modes of sonic fugitivity and how we can and have built vibrational architecture to protect ourselves and build shelter from the storm. Um, Recently, I've also been doing a lot of work in audio AI as someone who's involved in sound and audio, but also as someone who has a background in engineering. Recently been playing and building this platform called Wavetable that allows you to hear your imagination. So I'll show you a little quick demo of what Wavetable is and how it works. It's using text to audio, kind of a generative AI technique where you can give it a prompt. So the prompt will be an upbeat holiday pop song with jingle bells and keyboards, and then it will generate audio related to that. So just give me a second to there we go. Pop your little prompt in, and then you get back a bunch of different audio samples related to that prompt. So working on stuff like that. So like I said, I'm not going to give a artist talk. If you are interested in diving maybe a little bit more into some of my past work, I'll leave a link to a talk that I gave at the University of the Arts in London in fall of 2022. That was a bit more of a freewheeling kind of overview of my practice. So instead of doing that now, you can go to this link later and maybe check that out and let me know what you think. What I really want to do is think a little bit more not about output, but about process. And in preparing this talk, I was thinking about myself when I was a student over 10 years ago in grad school in a program similar to Parsons D&T. This is a photo of me when I was in grad school about 11 years ago now. And I had a lot of questions of what the hell was I doing? I didn't really know what was going to be happening. I was thrown into a really expansive grad art and technology program that had a lot of possibilities. ITP called, it says it's the center of the recently possible. And so I had questions at the time that some of you might be having, which is just, what am I doing? What should I be focused on? What the hell am I going to do after grad school? There's so many things that I could be trying out at this time, which I think you should be trying out and exploring lots of different things. Um, but which one of these things is going to get me closer to the kind of outcomes that I want, which for all of you might be, wildly different. Um, so looking back at this, these questions, one way to frame my process retrospectively is through a framework that I'd like to introduce called the multi-arm bandit problem. And I don't know if any of you have heard of this idea before. I recently encountered it, and reflecting on it has really kind of helped me think a lot about what I was doing 10 years ago when I was a student, and also just where I am as an artist right now, and what kind of decision-making frameworks that I'm using to make around what should I be doing with my time and my resources. So the multi-arm bandit problem, it comes from probability theory. It's used in reinforcement learning. And it's a problem which kind of focuses on this thought experiment. And in this thought experiment, there's a gambler that's facing a slot machine. And the slot machines that have the arms that you pull down, those are usually called one-arm bandits. But in this in this thought experiment, the machine doesn't have one arm. It actually has many arms, call it N arms, 10, 100, 1,000, a million different arms. And some of these arms have a high probability of paying out a jackpot, and others are not as great to choose. But the gambler doesn't really know which arm is which arm is going to give it the best probability of an outcome. So the problem is about pulling the arms in an order that maximizes the expected total gains. And gains can be anything, right? When this problem was originally introduced, it was thought about in the context of clinical drug trials. So for a company that has $1 million and maybe 10 different drug trials that they could try, it just trying to think about which decision should I make? What should I optimize for? What drug trial do I want to put resources into? For you, it might be worth just considering and thinking about like what are the gains that you're looking to get out of being a student or in post graduation. Where do you want to be in your career? What do you think you want to have as your outcome? Each pull costs resources. It costs time. It costs effort. Costs money. And ideally, you want to maximize whatever gets you closer to your goals. So there are two actions that you can do in this decision. You can explore, or as the literature says, you can exploit. I want to just pause for a second and kind of call out the messiness and a critique of the word exploit and exploitation. I don't offer this framework as a way to suggest that you should exploit things or people. There's a very storied history of the word exploit and exploitation, and not surprisingly, white scientists coming up with this framework that is statistical and probabilistic and using words like explore and exploit has its own kind of connotation. So I'm just introducing the historic kind of understanding of this framework, but maybe we can use a different word than exploit. So I like to use the word harness. And harness in this sense means applying knowledge that you've accumulated through exploration. So as you explore, you gain experience, you start to learn what things get you better outcomes or get you closer to the things that you want. And you would then harness that knowledge that you've accumulated through exploration to further, maximize your expected output. So in the context of exploring, the gambler needs to learn new knowledge about the machines and simultaneously use what they've already learned to optimize their decision. In harnessing, you pull the best arm that you found. So having done your explorations, you now know what arm is going to get you the biggest output, and you pull that. If you spend a little too much time, if you spend too little time exploring, you'll get stuck playing a machine with low expected payoff. But if you spend too much time exploring, you'll earn less and than you would have if you played the best arm. And so this is why it's kind of called this explore, exploit, or explore harness trade-off. People tend to gravitate to different sides of this spectrum. If you're really into exploring like myself, it comes really easily. But it also means that it might be harder to make a commitment and harness what you've learned about yourself and the world. Other people are more committed, but risk being too conventional in their choices. They miss better avenues for their efforts. Most people, however, tend to do less than optimal for both, not exploring and not harnessing, and doing things out of blind habit, kind of half-heartedly. Okay, so that's the framework that I just want you to all to kind of hold in your hands as we kind of move forward in the presentation. I kind of want to introduce one more practical way of maybe thinking about exploring that you might want to think about using in your own practice as students, which is prototyping, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. For me, I define prototyping as a process for trying out different ideas in different forms, essentially exploring your idea space and seeing what's out there. And as I've discovered, in the moment, but also retroactively, I think I do a lot of exploring first, and then I'll harness information around what's working and kind of diving deeper into that in order to move forward the work that I do. So I'd like to talk a bit more about this one project called The Harvester. It's a handheld sampler and synthesizer that lets you play music with everyday sounds. I'll show you a little video clip of what it looks like and how it sounds.
I mean, if I can move it anywhere.
So the harvester lets you take a small sound sample and then play it back musically, essentially letting you play music with the world around you. Oops.
I mean, if I can move.
There we go. That video was from like about a year ago, but the idea for the harvester actually started much earlier, more than 10 years ago, actually, when I was a student in grad school, when I was exploring the ideas of new musical interfaces. And in particular, I was really interested in trying to design a musical interface that allowed for touch and tactility to be the interface for playing music with other people. And so what I want to show is a video of the first kind of instrument that I built in this kind of exploring framework around musical expression and touch. I saw in the chat that there might be some audio issues, but let me know if it sounds like other people are getting audio. So just let me know if there's any I should do. Oops. Okay. So this was the software for the harvester at the time. It's a pure data patch, and I really enjoyed the interface and the interaction that I designed at the time, but was actually a little bit more interested in the software and this ability to kind of take sound samples and play them back musically. So I ended up collaborating with a friend who's a musician. Her name's Kaylee Staples. We started a music project called Glass Salt, and we essentially used the harvester to make a couple of albums. And again, still kind of in this space of exploring and seeing what's possible with the harvester as software and its sonic capabilities. So I'm going to play just a small bit of this videos of us kind of rehearsing or playing for the first time. And what you'll hear is I'm going to whistle, and that whistling sound will get captured by the harvester sample or get held by the harvester. And then I'm going to play back that whistle musically, and then Kaylee is going to kind of play on top of that. There we go. Cool. So around that point, I was like, great, this is what I want to be working on. This is what I kind of want to dig in a little bit. And I feel like at this point, I started to kind of harness this knowledge that I've been accumulating about the harvester, the software, the interaction, the music that I was making with other people, which led me to move from just the software on my computer into building its own hardware, its own kind of self-contained interface as an instrument. So I wanted to show this, like, this is the first time that I ever got to kind of start down that path. I designed a circuit for the harvester, and this is me first time prototype playing with it.
Harvester Hello World test.
You can see I didn't even like solder it correctly. I had to make a little jumper wire in between the IC chip and the 5-volt regulator.
Harvester.
Okay. So this is the first version of the Harvester. This is sort of the V1 of it. I was really happy with and did lots of this, stuff with it. I would take it out with me into like the snow. So here's a video of me playing with the Harvester next to this little snowy creek. And this is what the final Harvester sort of looks like today. It's a bit more robust. It has this green mossy kind of cover to it, buttons for recording and playing back. It's essentially an audio I/O hat for a Raspberry Pi, so all open source software. It has a rechargeable LiPo battery as well, which gives you a few days worth of time with it without having to have it tethered to wall power. It also has a gyroscope built into it, so you can affect the sound by moving it around 3 different degrees of axes. I'll just show a little video of that. Go. Yeah, and so the instrument has become a thing that I carry and make music with and collaborate with other artists with on. Just show you some photos of it. I'll play a couple of examples of some of more full longer work that I've done with the Harvester for a residency last 2 years ago, 2020, at Wave Farm up in the Catskills. My collaborator who I showed earlier, Kaylee Staples, and I made this new work called Celeste, where we were interested in the radio transmission frequencies floating in the sky, in the celestial sphere, and in deep space. So we decided to engage with the two opposing ends of the electromagnetic frequency spectrum, the very low frequencies in the atmosphere between 3 and 30 hertz, and the cosmic radiation emitted from stellar radio sources at frequencies above 30 exahertz. So we used some VLF receivers, but also composed original music and made some field recordings to create this new work called Celeste, which I'll play just about a minute or so of.
You are listening to Celeste. We are Glass Salt. Up next is the Star Report.
New moon. Sky was overcast, full of clouds. Stars were not visible this night. then last piece, kind of built with the Harvester more recently, is this work called Wake, which is a kind of a similar vibe of combining field recordings, original music composition, and generative audio techniques to make a work that was inspired by and around thinking about the past that we're losing to climate catastrophe and what might exist in the future. I'm just going to play a little bit of this work as well.
This is the first point on a long spectrum that goes as far back and as far forward, but also as far down, as far up, as far inward, and as far outward, as far east, west, south, and north, and as far in every direction possible. On every path possible. And in every spiral of movement possible. This is where memory lives.
Okay. I'll just leave off with the Harvester to say that last year it was accepted into this new interfaces for musical expression conference where I wrote a paper about it, which is really cool to kind of get it into, into the canon, but also to get it published, get it into this proceedings, and get to be in conversation with other folks that are building instruments like this. So I'm going to jump ahead just for the sake of time and kind of wrap up and conclude. But I have another kind of project that would have kind of demonstrated a bit more about prototyping, which maybe we can talk about in the Q&A or some other time if you want to hit me up. Yeah, I want to come back to this idea of this multi-arm bandit problem, and just kind of leave us with some questions around, like, what are you maximizing for? What are your desires? What outcomes do you want? I think being a student, it's really hard to kind of see beyond graduation when you're kind of really focusing on figuring out and doing a lot of exploring. And I don't blame you. I was that way when I was a student too. But I think I also had a degree of understanding that the period of exploration does not come to an end, but I think that there are greater heights to be had once you've kind of figured out what you are good at, what you like doing, what's bringing you the things and helping you self-actualize in ways that are valuable to you, and committing to those things, really kind of harnessing the knowledge that you've acquired through your time exploring. So is it fame? Is it prestige? Is it money? I think kind of figuring out those things for yourself is useful. For me, it's joy. I've recently realized that joy is the thing that I am trying to maximize in the work that I'm doing. And having come to that realization has really made my practice currently really joyful and really something that I look forward to doing. Sustainability is another thing that I really kind of prize, and just the ability to open up to some bigger possibility. So I'll leave you with a few other things. Exploring has a limit, and whenever you realize that or not, I think it's just something to keep in mind. But as I have lots of morbid thoughts sometimes, if I were on my deathbed, I would probably say to myself, I probably over explored a little bit too much, but I'm really happy that I did. And I think that there is a lot of value in over exploring. So with that, I just want to leave with some really last quick self-indulgent self-promotion. I'm giving a talk at Cara this Friday. You can find out more information about at this link that I'm going to drop in the chat right now. Oh, I just exited the chat. Let me do that again. There we go. So this is info at Cara. I'm also going to be doing a performance with a collaborator and friend, Brenda Ejima at DIA in late May. Sorry, mid-May. You can find more information about that here. And the work that I'm doing at Abrons Art Center will have its world premiere at the end of May of this year. The work is called The Hurricanes in Your Mouth, and I'd love to see you there. So stay tuned for more about that. Thank you so much for listening.
Great. Thank you so much, Johann. And for any interested parties, I'll add those links that Johann just dropped into the email that was announcing today's Cloud Salon. So yeah, once again, thank you, Johann. I want to open up the floor to anyone who might have any questions or things they'd like to discuss. So like I said, all of you are muted at the moment, so if you would like to ask a question, if you could raise your virtual Zoom hand, that would probably be a good way to do it. Then I can know to unmute you. So I'll let people think about that for a moment. But while we're okay, we got one person raising their hand. Awesome. Great. I just wanted to say I'm gonna jump the line, but then Psychonaut Sai will be right up next. I think that this question of exploring versus exploiting or harvesting or whatever kind of terminology you want to
Harnessing.
use,
Yeah.
is really interesting and really important to keep in mind. And Johann, with your project being called The Harvester, that also is perfectly in line with that idea of harvesting. I mean, of harnessing, right? And I'm thinking about the duality between sowing and harvesting, right? One can't exist without the other. And you
Sure.
can't just sow the field with more and more seeds because eventually nothing's going to grow. But you also
Right.
can't get anything without that act of planting.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think that's a nice other way to explore that framework. Yeah, exactly. I think I had to kind of try out a lot of different things and just see what was vital, uh, what had possibility to grow, what was viable, I think is the word I'm looking for. Yeah.
Well, okay, Psychonaut Sai, I'm not sure who you are, but I'm going to ask you to unmute so you can speak.
Yeah, I had a quick question about if you were able to have your sound-driven works in commercial settings or more curatorial or gallery spaces, or where you found the most reception towards your sound works.
That's a good question. That's a really good question because I think I'm still figuring that out in some ways. I think it's been successful in a music context and kind of an experimental music context. I think it's also been pretty successful in a performance and installation context, whether so in the context of maybe like galleries or institutions presenting it as performance or installation, has been pretty good. For a while, I was also thinking of like getting into selling it as a product, as an instrument, and I did a lot of exploring down that route, and it's a hard It's a hard path to go down. Just logistically, I think that it has a lot of challenge. So, there's a version of me that is just like soldering harvesters all day long, and that person's very happy. But I also think that there's other things that I have been wanting to do with my time, um, other things that I've wanted to harness. So I found like actually like tool building and like the harvester, I consider a kind of tool and a prop for exploring a lot of ideas and concepts that are important to me, and bringing it into a performance context has been really fruitful. So I get to kind of build and design these like tools and props for performance, and get to play with them in the space of performance and installation.
Great, thank you. Are there any other anyone else want to ask any questions? If not, I have one ready to go. Okay, so I'll wait for any other hands to go up, but with the with the images that you showed, the stable diffusion generated images to accompany the idea of the multi-armed bandit, um,
Yeah.
I see a really interesting correlation between the input and output of machine learning and AI in context with the explore and
Mm.
harness. Um,
Oh yeah, totally.
because yeah, there's only so much. Well, all of that exploration is the data set that went into it, and the harvest is getting that prompt out the other side. And with the project that you showed about the generating audio using machine learning procedures, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that nature of the creation using those kind of systems in conversation with the exploration that makes them possible.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm like relatively new, I guess you would say, to trying like leveraging these tools in like a creative context, let's say. So yeah, like hilariously, like I was like, I want an image to accompany like this multi-arm bandit problem. I can't draw. So let me just, yeah, this was like a perfect excuse to try something like Stable Diffusion or Dolly. And you're totally right. Like I was just kind of hitting generate, 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 and hoping and trying to see what was the best output that I could get. And it didn't really do a fantastic job. So the three that I used were kind of the three best that I kind of was able to that I decided to select. Um, with the audio stuff too, I mean that's a weird it's a weird one because I I mean the sort of the reason why I kind of was even interested in exploring that was I do a lot of work as a sound designer for performers, and the context in which I was, deciding to reach for that like generative AI as a tool was, working with performers who um, sometimes don't have the vocabulary. Admittedly, they self-admit this, for the kind of sound that they want, but they kind of have this like vibe that they're going for. They're like, I want like something shimmery and ethereal, and then something loud and drony, and then like field recordings of like children playing outside. And it became clear or like apparent to me that like the actual like output and like the precision of it is not really what's most important. I think having a rough stand-in to keep the generative work going, the performance generative work going, was more important. So being able to use this tool to quickly, rapidly prototype ideas and get something on the page, so to speak, to kind of keep a larger creative process moving forward was um, was the intention behind building that tool. So yeah, I early thoughts, but I guess I'm thinking that like it really just depends on like what are you trying to do with this tool, and what is the gain or the outcome that you want. And maybe with these tools right now, like lowering your expectation is also like part of the game too, of like, you know, it's not going to ever be exactly what you want. So maybe that gives some, that's one way to think about exploring, you know, like the grass is always greener or something, like exploring to eventually find perfection in your practice is probably never going to happen. But you can get closer, you know, you can find like a local maxima and be satisfied with that. But there may be like other peaks out there. So it is again like kind of like this balance you have to kind of take in, you know, have I found good enough or more than good enough? And in that, I should maybe like double down on this versus continuously exploring and spinning the wheel, hoping that you might find something better.
I really like that use of the term local maxima for the idea of polishing a practice. Well, we should probably get wrapping up. Thank you again, Johann, very much for joining us.
Yeah, of
I'll
course.
I'll be sending out those links via email for anyone who is interested in following up. I also want to announce an upcoming event. I'll probably announce this at the next Cloud Salon as well. But the DT Pop-Up Arcade at Wonderville will be happening on February 22nd from 7 to 10 p.m. So let me just see if I can drop that little promo flyer in the chat. So
Nice.
if you are around and able, you should definitely come check out the Pop-Up Arcade at Wonderville. Um, all right. And I think without further ado, I'll say thanks again to Johann. We
Thanks,
appreciate you coming
Jesse.
and talking to us.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks,
And
everyone. Take care.
yeah, thanks everybody. Happy Cloud Salon.